Our first speaker of the day is the co-founder of Charity Science, a nonprofit that runs both the Gilbrell incubated charity Science Health and the research and training program Charity Entrepreneurship, which helps people start high-impact charities. Please join me in welcoming up on stage Joey Savoie.
Thanks. Great. Let me see if I can get my slides up here. Maybe not. Perfect. So today I'm going to be talking about charity entrepreneurship, but before,
Maybe it's also batteries?
yeah, sorry about that. Let's testify. Sorry. Yeah, maybe out of batteries or something like that, or if I'm pointing it in the wrong way. Well, I'll just start with the slides unassisted, and we'll see if we can get the clicker back. So before I talk about charity entrepreneurship, I first want to talk about here. This is a slum in Lucknow. Lucknow is a city in India. And you can see a couple things by looking at this picture. You can see that it's quite poor. It's quite an economically challenged area. And also there's some, thank you, major health difficulties that go on. It's hard to see, but there is kind of sewage and a lot of garbage and a lot of things that would cause kind of infectious disease to be fairly prevalent in this area. And indeed it is. It has huge health challenges. One thing that's harder to see from this picture is the sheer size of this slum. It's massive. Me and a team of 5 surveyors, when we were working there trying to collect numbers for vaccine reminders, took days just to cover a portion of the slum. It truly was a massive challenge to just cover this area. And of course, this is just one slum in Lucknow City. There's over 200 official slums in Lucknow, not to mention all the unofficial ones, with similar sorts of economic and health challenges spread throughout the entire city. A nonprofit could work out of Lucknow and have its work easily cut out for it. But of course, we can zoom out further and look at the state that Lucknow is based out of, Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is huge, almost mind-bogglingly large for a state. It would actually be the 6th biggest country in the world if it was a country. But of course, it's just a single state of India. So perhaps unsurprisingly, you could have a large-scale organization working out of UP and trying to tackle some of these global poverty and economic challenges and still only make a dent in the kind of massive challenges that UP has. But of course, we can zoom out even further and look at India, a country with over 1 billion people and huge challenges. People often say it's better to think of India like the EU in terms of the diversity of languages, of people, of cultures, of challenges. And you can imagine that it's hard for me not to laugh when often the first question I get when I tell people that we work out of India is people say, oh, when are you expanding to the next country? I go, well, it might take a while. There's actually quite a lot of work to be done, even just here. But of course, India is not the only country. There are huge challenges across the whole world, and global poverty isn't the only challenge. There's migration issues. There's animal issues. Farm animal suffering is a huge problem. There's mental health issues. There's all sorts of huge problems that are going on in the world. And why it's important to kind of talk about these problems is I think people have the impression that there's already a lot of charities out there. These problems are already being worked on or addressed. And it's really hard to truly get the order of magnitude of these problems, just how severe they are. Despite there being fantastic charities working in some of these areas, there just are even bigger challenges. It'd be kind of like saying, we don't have to worry about having any more hospitals. We already have one in London. There's a lot of room for more good to be done across virtually every issue. So we're going to be talking about charity entrepreneurship, a potential solution to getting more resources and good done on these sorts of issues. We're going to be talking about the importance of it, why it might be the highest impact career if people are a good fit for it. Who is charity entrepreneurship a good fit for? So whether you might be a person who would work really well in it or not. And finally, we'll be talking about how charity science is aiming to help the founders. Sorry, that's how our organization, Charity Entrepreneurship, is aiming to help entrepreneurs who are working in the field. So first, I want to talk about what is an effective charity. I'm going to talk about effective charities specifically throughout this kind of presentation. And what we mean, what I'm talking about when I say that, is charities that kind of could be GiveWell recommended charities or ACE recommended charities, charities that are really seen as leaders in their field. We're not just aiming to start any charity, we're aiming to start the most cost-effective, the most evidence-based charities, charities that really could be seen as the best place for an EA-minded donor to donate. When I discuss the kind of different pros and cons of charity entrepreneurship, I'm going to try to use more of a cluster approach. So looking at it from a lot of different angles and a lot of different perspectives, instead of kind of making a single linear argument step by step. So the first argument, and maybe the most obvious argument for charity entrepreneurship, is just the scale. So here's some of the money moved numbers for some of the GiveWell top charities, and they're often in the tens of millions. And this is just the funding that's coming from GiveWell and Good Ventures to these charities. It's not counting kind of all outside grants or all outside funding they get outside of that. So as you can imagine, a very small difference in impact from these charities can make a huge difference in overall impact on the world. If you start a charity that's 1% more effective than these, just because of the massive sizes of money, $20 million being moved to it, it can create a huge amount of good to the world compared to many other career options that people could be considering. There's also the possibility of having hits. So charity entrepreneurship is kind of inherently a risky job. It is based on kind of a smaller probability of these large successes. One example of success would be becoming a GiveWell recommended charity. That'd be a huge success. You could potentially direct millions more dollars to an issue. GiveWell says that when they recommend a new charity, they often get different pools of people interested, so more people engage with effective charity and donate to effective charity. It's not just kind of redirecting money from one effective charity to another. And that can have a huge impact. But even smaller probability, but even bigger chance of having impact is with these kind of very small chances of huge impact. So most of the charities that you see today were at one point a very small new charity. And a charity leader like Oxfam really does establish a field. It could establish a field in a more positive or impact-focused direction or not. And even if there's a very small chance of this, it ends up being very high impact if you could start potentially the next Oxfam, potentially the next large-scale charity that shapes a movement. The next argument for this is a neglectedness. So charity entrepreneurship is on surprisingly few people's radars. People seem to think that charities just sprout out of the ground or something like that, or they've always been around, or maybe they're mostly started by 55-year-old haggard professors who've been working in the area forever. But it is kind of a viable career option along with for-profit entrepreneurship that EAs should consider. So this is a chart of all the different cause areas and jobs that EAs were considering, and you can see charity entrepreneurship is a fairly small percent of impact and areas that people are considering. Now, I do think that charity entrepreneurship is only a great fit for a fairly small percentage of people, but I do think it should be more on people's radar. It's fairly neglected, even in the awareness space. Most people haven't seriously considered, could I found a charity or could I work in this space versus working more directly for one or starting something in the for-profit space. The next kind of argument for it is the tractability and track record. So when you are thinking about a charity, starting a new charity, a big factor is what are the odds of this charity having success? Is it 1 in a million? Is it 1%? But historically, the charities that have been started with kind of an explicit focus on cost effectiveness, an explicit focus on evidence base, an explicit focus on kind of doing the most good from an EA perspective, have been historically quite successful. There are funders and people interested in working for those sorts of organizations. If you look at kind of all the charities in the world, a very, very small percentage of them are explicitly focused on cost effectiveness or kind of any issue that an EA would see as the most important thing to maximize. So charities that get started in this area have kind of a huge competitive advantage at maximizing that goal, at maximizing cost effectiveness and maximizing evidence base. Some examples of charities that have kind of explicitly done this are New Incentives, Charity Science Health, Fortify Health, and those were all started by kind of EA-minded people who were looking at founding something with the highest impact possible. And they've all been GiveWell incubated, and hopefully some of them will become kind of top GiveWell charities in time as they develop further. Some of ACE's and GiveWell's top recommended charities weren't necessarily founded by people who were extremely experienced in the field. They were founded by people with more of an analytical mindset, more of people who are looking to do the most good. So that's a really important factor to keep in mind when considering if charity entrepreneurship is a good fit or what the probability is of this charity being high impact, is that just by virtue of aiming at something being high impact and that being the main goal, it gives your charity a huge advantage versus other charities that are accidentally maximizing that goal because they were founded in the right area. No EA presentation would be complete without kind of a hard numerical expected value calculation. There's a couple on charity entrepreneurship. So Peter Herford did one based on Charity Sciences Health's numbers. These aren't our numbers. They're GiveWell's numbers of kind of the estimated chance of becoming a top charity, and then we took the expected value of the estimated chance of how much money would be moved and all that sort of thing. And it ended up being the average staff member was worth about $400,000 donated to a top charity per year. So that's an extremely high impact career. There are relatively few earning to give jobs that would result in a $400,000 donation each and every year. And that was just for the average staff member of an early stage charity. It wasn't for the founders, which were disproportionately important. We did another more pessimistic calculation because we really like being skeptical, and put only a certain percentage chance that a charity would even get as far as Charity Science Health. Maybe there's only a 25% chance that it ends up getting there. And remodeled it with new updated numbers. And we also ended up with a co-founder expected value of $200,000 donated to kind of equivalently high impact charities a year. So it's an extremely high impact career from a numerical perspective, and it is really tail end. So this is assuming an 85% chance of charities having zero impact, of them not doing any good. But because that kind of 15% chance of becoming a GiveWell top charity or becoming an extremely high impact charity in animals is so high impact, it ends up being quite a valuable career. There's a whole bunch of other benefits that I could go into in a lot of depth, but I'm just going to have to go through really quickly. So it's one of the best careers to go into for skill building. That's part of the challenge of charity entrepreneurship, is you have to be good at a lot of things or learn to get good at a lot of things. But it does really teach you things quick. If you want a chance at getting good at managing and hiring and firing and everything from research to comms, charity entrepreneurship is probably one of the most diverse jobs that you're going to encounter. So it does end up building kind of these expertise that would be useful in a wide range of jobs, including starting charities, but also more generalized jobs. Similarly, career capital, a lot of people like looking at people who can start their own projects. It tends to imply that there's going to be less management overhead. It tends to imply that this person's a self-starter and able to motivate themselves. There's a lot of good kind of signaling benefits of having it on your resume, although I don't think that's the main reason you should start a charity. Another fact that is really nice is the attributable impact. So when you're considering the impact of your career, you generally have to look at two factors, both the organizational impact, so how good is this organization, is it net positive, and then your personal impact on the organization. Am I doing a better or worse job than the person who would have been hired in my place? This makes calculating impact complicated and it gets discounted. When you're doing charity entrepreneurship, if indeed it was a charity that wouldn't have been started without your involvement, you can look more directly at just the organizational impact. You don't have to think about as much your personal impact. I mean, you do have to take into account your co-founder and that sort of element, but it's a cleaner calculation. You can more directly attribute the impact to the work you're doing. And job satisfaction. So very much a double-edged sword. For some people, this is the worst job in the world, definitely. It's ambiguous, it's hard, it's stressful, there's no one to pass the buck up to or blame another problem on. But for other people, it's super fantastic. The level of job autonomy, the level of satisfaction you get from accomplishing something, the level of kind of responsibility and switching different stuff. There's just a lot of benefits of this if you're the right personality fit. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that would be later. There's also some benefits kind of outside of your specific organization that trickle into the rest of the EA community. So there's a lot of learning value from projects getting started in this way. Our first project at Charity Science wasn't very successful. It didn't work. But we were very, very meticulous on keeping our records and publishing why we thought it didn't work, how we thought it didn't work, what we thought might work in its place. And a bunch of different EA organizations took those lessons and adjusted their strategies. They changed what they were going to do. And it ended up being kind of impactful, even though the direct impact of the charity wasn't very significant. The same is true for every charity started. If you're transparent about your mistakes or what happened or what went wrong, the whole community can really benefit from that kind of learning. Also, inspiration. charity entrepreneurship is a big, ambitious career, and it's scary and seems out of reach for a lot of people. But the more people that do it, like Charity Science Health inspiring Fortify Health, or Fortify Health inspiring the next generation, or New Incentives inspiring charity science, as more EAs pick up this career and can talk about how it works, what the strengths and weaknesses, it kind of makes it more of a viable option for new people to go into. So you're kind of setting a path, another path to impact that EAs can follow. And finally, room for more funding. You don't have to start many charities to create a truly huge amount of room for more funding. So in areas where generally there's a lot of funding, but not a lot of fantastic places to donate to, starting a charity can open up that field and can allow greater expansion for the cause area as a whole. Why now? Well, now's a particularly good time to start a charity. It's a much better time than when we started a charity, actually, so I'm kind of jealous for that. There's a lot of funder support. A lot of people in the EA movement are interested explicitly in funding new organizations, so that's very convenient. Givell, of course, has their incubation program, which is specifically targeted at charities that could become Givell recommended, as well as open philanthropy and EA funds. But there's also a lot more kind of organizational mentorship type support. There's a lot of people who have now gone down this path and are willing to talk to you, both in animals and poverty, both the areas we're looking at. That is very helpful. Being able to see the mistakes that someone made just a year ahead of you can allow you to kind of avoid those same pitfalls. And of course, our charity entrepreneurship program is built to kind of train people up and help them and make the process of starting a high-impact charity as straightforward and easy as possible. And we kind of built the program based on what other charity founders said they would have most benefited from early in their charity's life, what would have helped them start either faster or better or learn some mistakes in a quicker way. So there's also a lot of ideas still available. So not only is there kind of a list of priority programs on Givell's list that are high impact, ACE has a list of charities that they think might be high impact, but Charity Entrepreneurship explicitly does research on kind of the areas that if a new charity were to start, it would be truly kind of cost competitive with the top Givell option or top ACE recommended charity. And there are a lot. We'll probably end up recommending 9 charities that could be founded, which means that 18 pairs of co-founders could go through this. The limiting factor really is people who want to do entrepreneurship, people who be a good fit for entrepreneurship. We do have kind of an abundance of high-impact ideas. So now I want to talk a little bit about who charity entrepreneurship is a good fit for, and I'll just go straight into it. The first thing I want to talk about is personality. This is probably the most important factor of whether you will make a good entrepreneur or not. It's very hard to change. This is an example of a great personality, not Prince William. I can't speak to his charity entrepreneurship abilities. He might be great, might not be. But Rob Mather, the founder of AMF, is a really good example of kind of a fantastic personality fit for charity entrepreneurship. He has kind of all these traits in spades, and you can really tell when talking to him that this is a very good fit for him. The most important trait is resilience. There will be bad days. There will be bad weeks. There will probably even be bad months in your organization. And you won't have kind of a boss to pep talk you the same way that you would in a traditional job. You do have to have a lot of intrinsic ability to kind of take the blows and keep coming. Every charity, when it's first starting out, feels like it's seconds away from falling apart, and that is just part of the process. So being able to be resilient to the negative things is kind of a necessary component because there will be bad stuff that comes up. And of course, you can lean on your co-founder and you can lean on your mentors for that, but having the intrinsic resilience is very, very important. Being ambitiously altruistic. So it's easy to be ambitious, and a lot of people are ambitious in the EA movement, but you really have to be ambitious about the right goals. If you have a goal like, I want to make this charity look as big as possible or as prestigious as possible, you'll end up going down a direction that doesn't lead to impact. You really have to be aggressively altruistic about that end line goal of saving the most lives or helping the most people or whatever kind of your charity's way to do good in the world is. You have to be results oriented. It's really easy to get lost in kind of these vanity metrics or sub-metrics that don't really connect to doing good in the world. And you have to be laser focused and a bit numerically minded to have a good sense of that. Not afraid to admit mistakes. You will make them. Every charity does. You only get that charity world learning value if you can, in fact, describe when you took a wrong turn. And if you don't admit mistakes, at least to yourself, you're just going to keep repeating the same things, and you will fall into traps. Self-motivated, also extremely important. There's not a boss kind of whipping you every day or even the same level of accountability or structure that you'd normally have in a job. You are kind of fundamentally in charge of your own hours and your own level of workability. one of the easiest litmus tests I talk about for are you a good fit for charity entrepreneurship is, could you get yourself through an online course where there's no deadline, there's no pressure, no one else is kind of holding you to it, but can you kind of work through that on your own steam and on your own ability? If you can, that's great. Charity entrepreneurship is a lot like that. There are, of course, donor check-ins, but they're extremely far between. It's 6-month check-ins compared to maybe daily that you generally have with a standard career. Creative. Really important to come up with lots of options. There's no guidebook. I mean, we're actually trying to make a guidebook, but there's no guidebook to all the different problems that you'll end up encountering. You will generally be starting a charity in an area that is a bit neglected, is a bit less thought about, there is a gap. So you won't be able to just kind of follow a linear step-by-step plan. A lot of the time, you'll come to a challenge and you'll have to think of what to do. And if you can only come up with 5 options, you're limited to the best of 5. If you can come up with 30, then you're limited to the best of 30. So being able to kind of brainstorm it and come up with a lot of ideas and then kind of compare them is extremely important. And finally, again, doing it for the right reasons. There's a lot of reasons to do charity entrepreneurship, but to get the highest impact charities, you really have to be focused on that, on the impact. There are a lot of things it helps to have. The EA community is a super useful resource. They have a lot of funding, they have a lot of connections, they have a lot of mentorship. That's great. It's great to be highly competent. That's not a surprise. Research skills or social skills, you might be able to get your co-founder to balance you out on the other one. But one of them is very helpful. And if you can have experience working in a small organization, especially a small, well-run organization, that will give you a lot of the systems and methodologies that you might use when founding your own. So there's some things that are less important than people think. The question I get most often is, do I need like a specific degree in this area? And unfortunately, most of the time degrees won't get to the level of detail that you actually need to get when founding a charity. So when we're working on SMS vaccine reminders, you absolutely do need to become an expert in SMS vaccine reminders. You need to read every study in the field. You need to talk to everyone who's done anything remotely similar to what you've done. But most degree programs won't get you there. They won't get to that level of detail. What you have to be good at is reading and interpreting and understanding evidence independently. In any case, you'll kind of have to really deep dive and become an expert with the available evidence that won't be kind of nicely structured into a class or course. So degree ends up being a lot less important. And in terms of kind of the reputation of your organization, it's a lot easier to hire a degree than to get a degree. Let me see if I want to talk about this. Yeah, maybe one thing I'll mention is just the precedent of people and degrees. If you think about the kind of most impactful charities out there, the top GiveWell charities, you don't generally think about what degrees or expertise those people have from before that charity. And if you actually look, some of them had no charity expertise. They weren't in that field. They were in some other field that built general competence, like consulting or something like that, and then transferred over to charity entrepreneurship. The same is true for other new charities. Targeted experience can be very helpful, but again, you'll run into a similar challenge with the degree. You won't be able to find a charity working on SMS vaccine reminders in Uttar Pradesh. That's why we're recommending a charity there. It'll be very hard to kind of get that level of nuance and details from working for a health organization. Something that is very important that people think you need is connections in the field. But how you build these connections is by working in the field. People are shockingly interested in talking to you if you're kind of a young charity founder who comes in with the background knowledge. You definitely want to read everything available possible before kind of contacting these experts. But if you do that, they want to see more people in their area. If you contact someone who's been a specialist in tobacco taxation, they want to see kind of new involvement, and they're generally very happy to talk to you. One exception with this is government connections. Governments are very challenging to get a hold of. Hire someone in the field who has those connections. There's a few things you can do to get a better sense of whether you might be a good fit for charity entrepreneurship. We have a quiz, but actually our applications are open now. So probably the best way, if you're unsure, if you think you might be a good fit or might not be, is to go through the application process. We try really hard not to waste people's time or make the application process too long, and we're going to try to give feedback to anyone who gets to the later rounds of what you might need to skill up in or what might need to be the barrier that you need to overcome to become a really fantastic charity entrepreneur. Let's just jump by that. We have a pretty detailed research process to come up to a list of recommended charity ideas. You can actually see back there, this is the result of our first year of research, which was on global poverty, kind of coming up with what areas might be the most promising to found charities in. This is a process that we used for animals, which was our research focus this year, although the incubation program is open to both poverty and animals. And it's a really tough process to kind of narrow down ideas from a wide range of kind of any charity that could be founded in the animal space, all the way down to the top 3 or 5 or 6 charities that could be founded. And a lot of people say, what about kind of an idea I'm passionate about or interested in? And we are open to applications like that, but it's tough. We did just spend a year doing a bunch of intensive research with the full research team, and this is our best guess at what the highest impact kind of gaps are in the movement. These are some of our ideas: tobacco taxation, conditional cash transfers. Our animal ideas aren't public yet, but they will be up in the next week, and there'll be kind of 6 recommended charities in that space. I want to talk really briefly about the incubation program, because the applications for this are now open, and it is coming up pretty soon. So the dates are June 17th to August 16th. It'll take place in London. Our team recently moved from Vancouver to London, so it's a lot closer to all you guys, which is nice. And we're very keen to get as many applicants. I always suggest people err on the side of applying. We're happy to spend the time and talk to you about whether you might be a good fit or not if you're unsure. We really do want to make it as smooth and possible to found a high-impact charity. So we're kind of going to be teaching all the skills that you might need, and we'll cater the curriculum a little bit based on what skills people are coming in with, but some things that you might be able to expect. We'll be teaching some evaluation, how to read studies, basic statistics, task management, and then logistical stuff like how to register a charity, what country you might want to pick to work out of, and how to work in that country, strategic decision-making, budgeting, all that sort of stuff. Basically, all the baseline skills you'll need. One thing I say to a lot of people is some people might come into this program with 5 skills out of 100, and some people might come in with 9 skills out of 100. But what's really important is how you're going to kind of pick up the next 91 skills. What's your speed of learning? Are you really keen on picking up this sort of stuff? We'll also talk about softer stuff. How would you know if a co-founder is a good fit for you? We'll match you with different co-founders throughout the program so you can kind of test out your fit, actually working with them on a concrete project that's related to charity entrepreneurship. After the program, we want to continue to give that support. We don't just kind of want to help people for 2 months and then have them fall off a cliff. We'll have Skypes with mentors, both like an alumni of the program, someone who started charity recently, some research staff who have worked on researching the specific idea that you're working on, and some other Skype with another connection in the program, so that you can kind of talk to someone who's going through the exact same challenges that you're going through, but maybe in another country. We're going to give seed grants. We have $50,000 to give to the charities that start right after the program. That will help because it means you don't have to fundraise for a while. You can kind of figure out your strategic direction, your plan, set up your website, and then start to think about fundraising outside of that. We'll be connecting people to a lot of mentors and funders and that sort of thing. This is another part of the reason why you don't really need a huge network coming in. We generally know the funders who'd be most interested in funding this charity entrepreneurship space. We'll be connecting people directly to them, and people won't need to worry about kind of having those connections from the outset. We'll be helping. And finally, we're going to try to make a long-term community. So in London, we will be offering kind of free co-working space for the next year if anyone wants to stay and work in London. And we do expect there'll be quite a charity hub that will be kind of built there over time. And of course, there's already the very large EA London community that's there and helpful to new organizations. An important quote that I want to touch on is a quote here from Fortify Health. And they're basically talking about how they didn't have a great sense of whether they were a fantastic charity entrepreneur. And a thing I say to a lot of people is, some of the best charity entrepreneurs I've met were not sure that this was a good career fit for them. They weren't sure if they were kind of had what it takes. But our team was sure. After we talked to them, we had a pretty good sense that, oh yeah, this person's pretty fantastic. So if you're feeling a bit underconfident or a bit unsure, err on the side of applying. It's pretty tough to know. And if you're feeling super confident, you might not be a good fit. That's also possible. People seem relatively uncalibrated as to whether they'd be a good fit for this sort of career. Just to retouch on kind of the goal of all of this, the Against Malaria Foundation has had a huge impact on the world. The Humane League has had a huge impact on the world. There's a lot of space and gaps for more charities like this to exist, for more people to work in these fields. And we really do want to kind of have a big batch of these charities that are started by EAs and are doing kind of good as the world continues. So that's our website. As I said, the applications are open now. If you're keen, you can also come and talk to me at office hours. They're happening right after this presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions about whether you might be a good fit or whether you should apply or what the process is like. But yeah, this is an incredibly high-impact career, and I wish more people would consider it as a serious option. Thank you.